The Universal Monsters franchise holds an iconic roster of characters. Each Universal monster has a famous face most associated with them. When we hear Dracula, we are all picturing Bela Lugosi.
I am Dracula.
Many would agree that some performances are incomparable to others. Throughout the span of nearly 30 films, it raises the question of which actor has played the most roles of the most monsters. There is a list of actors who played only one monster in a single movie. Examples such as Tom Tyler as Karras in The Mummy's Hand, John Hall and Arthur Franz both as the Invisible Man, or Carlos Villarius in the Spanish version of Dracula. Single appearances, yet still iconic characters include the Bride of Frankenstein played by Elsa Lanchester and Countess Maria Zaleska, or Dracula's daughter played by Gloria Holden. In order to avoid a cluttered list, characters that are debatably even a part of the classic franchise will be disqualified. This would include Gwynplaine, also known as the Man Who Laughs, the Werewolf and She-Wolf of London, the Man-Made Monster, the Mad Ghoul, Mole People, and the Metaluna Mutant. With guidelines set, we can list the official roster of monsters: Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, the Wolf Man, Phantom of the Opera, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. The easiest method would be to go actor by actor who played multiple monsters chronologically. The actor who is regarded as the originator of the franchise was Lon Chaney. Chaney played what can be referred to as proto-monsters from the silent era. He was famously known as the Man of 1,000 Faces, but only had the chance to play two Universal monsters: Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1923, and the Phantom of the Opera in 1925. It was rumored that Chaney was considered to play Dracula before his death at the age of only 47. This would make sense due to Chaney's previous portrayal of a vampire in London After Midnight. Directed by Todd Browning, the same director that would go on to direct Dracula starring Bela Lugosi only a year after Chaney passed away. Bela Lugosi is of course known most famously as Dracula, who he played twice, once in the original and again in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Due to the success of Dracula, Lugosi was offered the role as the Frankenstein monster the same year. However, he turned down the role because the monster never spoke. Lugosi would accept the role 12 years later in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. While these are the only two of the iconic monsters Lugosi played, it should be noted that he also played minor characters such as Igor in Son of Frankenstein and The Ghost of Frankenstein. In a total of 13 Universal horror films, Lugosi would remain a legend of the genre. Next would be Boris Karloff, another legend of the horror genre and Lugosi's rival. It goes without saying that Karloff is best known for playing the Frankenstein monster and being the most iconic portrayal. Karloff would play as the monster in 3 films: the original in 1931, The Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein. Karloff is arguably the only actor on the list that plays the most iconic versions of more than one Universal monster. Besides being the Frankenstein monster, Karloff also played Imhotep in The Mummy. He only played the character once, but has always been considered the best before the mummy would be turned into a cliché hobbling zombie. Usually unacknowledged, Karloff starred as Dr. Jekyll and was credited as Mr. Hyde for Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde as a character has slowly been adopted in the universe of classic monsters. As a public domain character, they have since been seen alongside the classic lineup in films including Van Helsing in 2004 and The Mummy in 2017. Karloff would be counted as a monster himself in Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff. Like his rival Bela Lugosi, Karloff would also star in 13 horror films produced by Universal Studios. Claude Rains as the Invisible Man would become the quintessential version of the character. Rains played the character Dr. Jack Griffin in the original film from 1933, however, this would be the only time he would take on the role. The only other monster Rains portrayed was as the Phantom of the Opera in the Technicolor 1943 remake. Rains would play minor roles throughout the franchise, such as the Wolfman, but he would only play 2 of the actual classic monsters. The most notable of all the actors that will be mentioned is none other than Lon Chaney Jr. Chaney played 4 of the classic monsters throughout the franchise's lifespan. of course his most famous being Larry Talbot aka the Wolfman. The Wolfman became Chaney's signature role that he played a total of 5 different times. The original 1941 film, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Chaney would play the Frankenstein monster in 1942's Ghost of Frankenstein. In the film, the monster becomes blind, causing it to stumble with extended arms. This became a key feature to virtually all depictions of the monster in the future. Whether they were parodies or cartoon depictions, many people associated the monster by stomping about while sticking out its arms. Also in Ghost of Frankenstein, he arguably also played the minor role of Igor once the brain is transferred into the monster's body.
Igor will live forever!
In Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, actor Glenn Strange is credited for playing the Frankenstein monster. However, Strange broke his foot while filming the climax of the film. This would require Chaney to once again don the monster makeup to finish shooting. While Chaney did not play the most famous interpretation of Karras, spanning 3 movies, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, and The Mummy's Curse, always playing the mummy in the most stereotypical fashion. The final of the 4 monsters Chaney played was Dracula in 1943's Son of Dracula. Although throughout the film, Dracula goes under the disguise of Alucard until others discover his true identity. Lon Chaney Jr. holds the record for acting in 17 Universal horror pictures, more than half as an iconic monster. 5 as the Wolfman, 3 as the Mummy, twice as Frankenstein's monster, and once as Dracula. Now that all actors who had starred as multiple monsters have been covered, it seems appropriate to give honorable mentions of those actors who played only one monster, but did so more than once. Claude Rains arguably played the most memorable version of the Invisible Man. However, the master of macabre, Vincent Price, would play the part twice in The Invisible Man Returns, and as a short cameo at the end of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the Invisible Man.
The actor who wore the face of Frankenstein's monster the most was that of Glenn Strange, beginning with the House of Frankenstein in 1944. Preceded by House of Dracula and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Strange is tied with Karloff playing the monster in feature films, but Strange would play a brief cameo in an Abbott and Costello television comedy special where the duo meet the creature from the Black Lagoon. John Carradine would tie with Bela Lugosi playing Dracula, once in House of Frankenstein and again in House of Dracula. Bela Lugosi had the chance to play all 5 appearances of Dracula throughout the franchise, similar to how Lon Chaney Jr. is the only actor to play the Wolfman. However, Lugosi refused to play Dracula again in fear of being typecast. The creature from the Black Lagoon required 2 different actors per film, one that could play the creature underwater and the other on land. Different actors would play the creature while on land in its trilogy. The only actor that would reappear was Riku Browning for all underwater scenes in all 3 of the creature's films. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Revenge of the Creature, and The Creature Walks Among Us. The only other debatable recurring actor was Ben Chapman, who played the creature on land in the original Creature from the Black Lagoon, and once more in the Abbott and Costello's Colgate Comedy Hour. At this point, Lon Chaney Jr. appears to have won as King of the Monsters. However, an unsung, uncredited actor ties with Chaney. A stuntman, Eddie Parker, filled the shoes as 4 different monsters when the stars were unable to perform their own stunts. The monsters Parker portrayed include the Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, and Mr. Hyde. Parker played the Mummy twice, once as Karras in The Mummy's Tomb and again in Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. He was primarily hired as the stuntman for any of Lon Chaney Jr.'s roles. This allowed him to don the makeup of the Wolfman multiple times and once as the Frankenstein monster in Ghost of Frankenstein. In the final act of Ghost of Frankenstein, the monster is trapped in flames of the burning castle, which was recycled in House of Dracula. Therefore, Parker arguably played the monster in 2 separate films. Eddie Parker's most unacknowledged work was as Mr. Hyde. Trailers and in the film itself lie when giving credits to Boris Karloff, who actually only played as Dr. Jekyll. As an uncredited stuntman, It is possible that Eddie Parker played the four monsters in other sequels, and even other monsters throughout the Universal Monster franchise. Various stuntmen would go uncredited, although having played just as many roles as monsters than others previously mentioned. Other stuntmen include Gil Perkins, who played Frankenstein's monster twice, Bud Wolf falling into the sulfur pit in Son of Frankenstein, and Ken Terrell in The Mummy's Hand. If you want to say which movie star played the most iconic Universal monsters, the award would go to Lon Chaney Jr. If you want to give credit where credit is due, then the work of Eddie Parker deserves to be acknowledged as well.